Welcome to Innovating Music, a podcast from the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the UCLA Center for Music Innovation. I'm your host, Dr. Gigi Johnson. Hello, this is Gigi Johnson from the UCLA Center for Music Innovation at the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music. This is going to be a bit of a different podcast today. We've had many speakers on the podcast in the past 2 years. We've been doing these half-hour to 1-hour sessions. We've taken a look at what is innovation for most of our first year. And in our second year here, we've spent a lot of time looking at what is happening in people's innovation lives and how technology is impacting music in all sorts of interesting ways. We've begun to also look at what's happening in terms of live music and local music. So this is a bit of an introduction to the 2019 plans we have coming and an invitation to those who listen to our podcast to come play with us. We've been taking a look now for about 2 years now, taking a look at what happens with music and streaming music and new technologies in music on local performance. What happens with local clubs? What happens with festivals? What happens with local music communities? And interestingly, we began to run into many of the Music Cities programs and projects starting really 2 years ago at South by Southwest, talking to whether it's the folks in Austin or Toronto or New York or London or San Francisco or Sydney or lots of other places, either in casual conversations, talking with them on panels, or in some cases, some really in-depth conversations about what is really happening with the local music communities. There's been a lot of stuff written about what's happened in Austin. There's been the night mayors that are now coming into a few major cities. And I guess we're right now in November 2018, saw the recent posting for a night mayor in Washington, D.C. We've had lots of conversations about gentrification, about how the increasing cost of real estate is not just causing challenges for the music user, enjoyer, listener, but it's been challenging to keep clubs open. It's been challenging to have a lifestyle that makes sense economically for artists in a local community. And we'll put in the show notes information to link you to many of the Music Cities pieces of research. What we're really looking at, though, is the interesting conversation about Los Angeles. That Los Angeles, in many ways, was not actively in a lot of these conversations about music cities, or I should say the city wasn't, though the city's doing all sorts of interesting things in music. Some individuals from Los Angeles have been involved in some of the conversations, but Los Angeles isn't seeming to face a lot of the same challenges for local music that is happening in a lot of other major cities. Los Angeles, however, is fairly unique in its combination of anything from co-writing to labels, or isn't it? I mean, do we have folks in Nashville and in New York that are similar types of communities or not? So we started a project a year and a half ago with a group of undergraduates here who went out and began to do interviews across the city. We began to do a mapping exercise of venues in the city, but also we did 40 interviews that were recorded and transcribed and digested about what is happening in Los Angeles on more of a qualitative level. What is music in Los Angeles? Interestingly enough, we've got 40, in many ways, really different stories of LA. And it got us intrigued. We took a bit of a pause and began to talk to people about what could be done to pull together more of a crowdsourced conversation, to bring together people about all the different issues, whether it's what's happening in downtown Los Angeles in terms of the big shift in terms of arts and growth and living spaces, but also what's happening in pop-ups, in different types of facilities, warehouse concerts, in some cases desert concerts, but that's not a downtown LA story. What's happening in terms of Latin music? What's happening in terms of K-pop? We found some really interesting stories on what's happening in Christian music. So we began to say, well, wait a minute here. Is this a single set of stories? Is this a single set of public policy indications? And in fact, it's 91 different neighborhoods just in the city of LA. How different is it? So we're putting together then a series of events across 2019 and starting in 2018, but our first events will be in 2019, to bring together communities to have this conversation, to both be doing research and talking to people, but also to be bringing the conversations together about what are the unique elements about Los Angeles and how do we bring together communities to create positive action, improve community living, better music environments, and what is really the sort of dynamics of power and change in the city? What's happening in terms of demographics? What's happening in terms of physical motion as people move through the city and different populations and areas are getting to be more popular, rents go up? Is it the same issues of other cities? Are we ducking it for some reason? What is the conversation? So we're working with some of the folks from the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. We're working with an interesting group of organizations and companies around the Los Angeles basin, and we invite you to come play with us. And I say play because we really want to be looking at this in a collaborative, conversational, in some cases demanding sense. What is happening and what makes your LA different than my LA? What happens that makes my students Los Angeles, depending on what type of music they love, a totally different environment or engagement, depending on what their passions are? What happens for the people who have been in music here for many years in understanding the new technologies? And what are the big trends that we could actually help positively for artists? So please join us at the events as they are announced on the podcast. We'll have invitation-only spots, but take invitation requests from our podcast listeners. But if you'd like to be a host of one of these events, if you would like to be on the guest list for the events, if you'd like to be interviewed for the research, if your company would like to be a physical host, we are still placing some of these events throughout our calendar. If you would like to be a marketing sponsor to help get the word out that we're doing this project, if you'd like to work on our interactive mapping project, or if you'd like to just talk about ways to get involved with this, please drop me an email at gigi.johnson, S-O-N, at ucla.edu. You can also find details about this on our Innovating, in our website. Sorry, I didn't think about the new name. We just changed the whole website. So the schoolofmusic.ucla.edu has a beautiful new website. You can still find us at innovation.schoolofmusic.ucla.edu. And we look forward to talking with you and sharing information about the futures of music in Los Angeles in ways that you and your organization, your friends, your community might be involved in this conversation and helping us move it further forward across 2019. Thanks a lot for listening and being a fan of Innovating Music. Also, let us know we're building back up the podcast momentum as we're finishing up 2018. Do you know someone who should be on the podcast that we should be including, not just in these future of music in Los Angeles conversations or the various music cities conversations, but who's doing something unique? Who is doing something that is thought-provoking in looking how tech is impacting our music lives, collaborations, distribution, ways of thinking, and ways of engaging music in our lives. Thanks for listening, and more in shortly upcoming future episodes. Thanks.
Well, that wraps up this podcast. Many thanks to the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music and the UCLA Center for Music Innovation for being our hosts of this ongoing series. You can subscribe to us in all the usual places, or you can come find us at innovation.schoolofmusic.ucla.edu. Join us again to follow the other adventures that we will be tracking down in Innovating Music. Thanks again.